Hey guys, this is Francina Simone with writing tips on how to improve your writing. This is the 5th time. Haha! This series is on how to write authentic characters, and this is video number 3, how to write backstory. Now, backstory is anything that happens to the character or in the world before the story begins, and usually the first impulse is to throw it all in a prologue or to throw it in chunks at the reader just so you can get it over with and they can understand what's going on, who the character is, and move on with the story. This, however, isn't really a seamless way of doing it. It's a bit clunky, it pulls the reader out of the story, so it's not the best way of doing it. So I've got 4 tips on how to do it authentically and with style. Now, I want to mention first that you may hear me talk about world a lot, and that's because to me, world and character, they're so seamless. The world is literally how the character sees it, especially if you write first person or follow the character closely in third person. And that's generally the writing styles that I talk about. Anything else that's way different from that, I really don't delve into, because these are my preferred methods of delivering an authentic story that's seamless and gives the reader a profound experience that mimics life in a way, even if it's fantastical writing or writing that's in the far, far, far future. My idea of story is an authentic experience that the reader feels themselves 100% with all of their emotions and everything. They're feeling it, they're feeling it, they're feeling it. With that in mind, step number 1, don't data dump. So for a lot of you who read sci-fi or fantasy, especially high fantasy or stuff that was written a while ago, like, you know, circa Harry Potter, I guess. Is that really a while ago? Anyways, the style then was just to have a huge prologue. Like, I'm talking Asimov here. The style there was just to data dump in the prologue because, you know, you're building a world in which the reader or the viewer needs to see. So data dumping isn't usually the way to go. It's very clunky and it distances the reader from the story itself. Because think about it. When you go to Wikipedia, do you feel immersed in the world that they're like data dumping on you when they're talking about 14 million people lived in this one squalor town here and blah 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 blah, and this is what it looks like, and here's a picture of the arch. You don't really feel like you're in the world. You're not smelling the streets or the people or whatever else you smell when you're in the world. You're outside of it and you're learning about it. It's almost like a history lesson. So we don't want to do that. The ways in which you can avoid that leads us into step number 2, which is to think about how you learn about people and or places when you were there. Generally, you get a first impression, and that's how you feel. That's your emotional impression based on what the person shows you. First impressions, we can all agree, are very shallow, and that's no way to leave your character or the story or the world, because your reader will hate you for it, but it's the best place to start, because it is, again, our first impression. You're going to have a first impression regardless of how much information you know about someone or don't know about them, because you never dive in until you start to see the fragments of a person. And this is how we learn about people. We learn about them in fragments. We spend time with them and we experience situations in which we watch them and see their actions or hear their words and what they say. They move us in emotional ways, and whether it's a positive emotional way or a negative way, they move us, and we base those present experiences with a deeper connection of who they are. Now you're saying, Francina, this video is about backstory, not how to make a deep character here in the now. You've already made that video. That's very true. So now, if we want to talk about putting backstory into these fragments so that we can learn about, say, the main character or the world or other characters in the book, we then do step number 3. We make emotional connections with the present experience to a past experience. Now, stick with me. I know this sounds really crazy because I'm talking about fragments and emotional connections and all this other weird shit that generally people don't talk about when they're talking about backstory or anything in general. However, I'm going to make it very clear with this example right now. In my first book, The Keeper's Vow, Katie is my main character, and when we meet her, we get a very shallow impression of who she is because, well, there is no way to meet somebody and have a deep impression of who they are without talking to them or, you know, seeing their actions, you know, even if it's over the span of 5 minutes. So we get the first shallow impression of who she is. She's kind of snarky, she's kind of lazy because she's ditching class. So we can obviously assume she's not scholarly and she doesn't really care to read books. You know, she's not that schoolish type person. We see that she's kind of self-centered. She doesn't really think about other people, and she really doesn't like bullies or bully type people based on her interaction with Tristan. You know, we get these shallow impressions. However, it isn't until she has this huge argument with her dad, a few chapters in, that we see a completely different side of her, or we get some backstory on what her life was like before the story began. So to set the present experience, her and her dad, they're having this huge argument. He's disappointed in her, and she's disappointed that, instead of being there for her and helping clarify the present situation at hand that he's very pissed about, he's yelling at her and he's saying kind of mean things, and he's being a parent who's scared, concerned, angry all at the same time, and feeling a bit betrayed by all sorts of people because he's the last person to find out what's been going on. And Katie runs out of the house because, he's kind of crossed the line in the sense, and it's a very charged emotional situation. So she's running, she's very angry. She stops at a bus stop in the middle of the city, and she's just sitting there, and she's staring out into traffic, and she doesn't see anything because she's still angry, and she's feeling those feelings of disappointment, and she's feeling those feelings that she feels when you're essentially let down by someone you care about very much. And it's in this moment, after the high conflict, and we kind of coming down towards, the moment of rest, or the moment that we can reflect on a situation that happened, however we're going to reflect on it. She's coming down into this moment where she starts to think about the past. And very specifically, and this is a key point, very specifically, the past connected to this feeling of disappointment and this feeling of letdown. She thinks about when she was younger and her dad let her down. He had a whole bunch of terrible shit happening. I mean, their whole family had a terrible thing happen to them, but her dad handled it in a very shitty kind of way. And it left her out blowing in the wind, even though she was so young, 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, it just kept going on for years, and she felt neglected, and she kind of was. I mean, if Child Protective Services had known about the situation, she probably would have a new family. But, luckily they had close family friends who took care of her for most of the time, and she just left her feeling like her dad abandoned her, and she didn't know why. She didn't understand when she was a kid. She just knew that she was spending a lot of time at other people's houses, that she was only supposed to go for the night and never went home until weeks later. And, it wasn't until she got a little older that she realized her dad had issues and all sorts of crazy stuff was happening. But nonetheless, she's feeling all of that from her past come rushing back in this moment because yet again, he's let her down in a way when she needed him. He reacted in a way that just didn't help her. It just set her up for abandonment yet again. So you can see where I took the present experience of the fight with her father and those emotions that she was feeling in that time and connected it with the past memories. Now these memories, I didn't just throw it out there on the page. It's very fragmented, and she's seeing pictures, the visual pictures of eating chips for dinner and not having real food around the house, or packing her bag to go spend the night over someone's house and not coming back until weeks later and having to get new clothes with these other family. And it's just being she's feeling these things again, and it's just building those images. Do we see how something might have happened in the past, and we get the feelings that she's feeling? And instead of me giving you words and a shit ton of backstory about her story, you get images and feelings, and that's far more impactful than any kind of words or data dumping that you can possibly do. So if you can deliver pieces of backstory with those fragments packed with emotion and connect them to an emotion in the present, I guarantee you that will be far better, and people will love learning about your character that way than they will with a prologue or some, long line of words. So step number 4, and this deals a lot with world building. It's also with building an authentic character, because your authentic character needs to live in an authentic world. And this is very similar to having fragmented emotions that come through. What you have to do when your character is in the world, instead of them walking down the street saying, to the left is Jim's cocoa, and to the right is Plantina's plantains, instead of them seeing certain buildings and listing them off like they're on Google Maps or some shit, you need to have them connect to their world with visual emotions. Now, I remember a while ago, I was at uni, we were in a workshop, a writing workshop or whatever, And this one guy, he wants to write fantasy. This is a whole nother story about how the teacher did not like fantasy or anything else like that, because why not write it in the real world? Anyways, so the guy, he wrote a fantasy novel, and it was very like, oh my god, it was fucking terrible. I mean, the names were hard to pronounce. They were just like consonants. And when he showed us the world, it was very like, to the left is this, to the right is this, 2 miles down this road, he walked, 2 miles, and then there was this one, and there's this one. And, there's this guy, and he looked like a lizard. And I was just like, oh god, this is horrendous. So it really made me think, how do we learn about places without it being like, directional? How? Well, the key point is to use visual emotions. And by visual emotions, I mean the way you feel when you think about a place or when you see a place. For instance, first thing that comes to your mind when I say movie theaters, probably thinking popcorn. You're probably smelling popcorn. You're probably thinking big screen and comfort. I don't fucking know what you're thinking, but I think popcorn. And when I think popcorn, I'm thinking of the smell, the feel of having to rub it on my jeans, and then my fingers feel kind of greasy afterwards. And I'm like, why did I rub it on my jeans? Anyways, so visual emotions, smelling something, it causes an emotional cue or emotional memory. Like if your character is in a fantasy world and they're walking past a bread shop and they smell the bread that they've eaten for the past 10 years of their life, or they smell the bread that they could never afford, or they're walking past the bar and they slip in the puddle that, they hope to God isn't piss, or they're walking down the street and there's like Jim the lizard who's always sitting there, always sleeping, and you really wonder if under those closed eyes he can actually see you, like if his reptilian lids are just fake, because he always seems to know where everyone is on the street, even though he seems to be sleeping. Like, those types of, that's kind of like the feeling of fear or wonderment. But visual emotions, it builds a world around you without you having to tell people where things are, because no one needs to know if the bread shop is next to the coffee shop to the left of the pet store. Nobody needs to know like the map of where things are, but they need to know how your character feels about the world around them. And once they know that, they know the world that they're in, and they're sold. There's no confusion of the world. There's no confusion on your character. They know that the character is solid and the world is solid, and they're with you on the experience. That is the number one reason to make your character authentic, to make the world around them authentic, to make your plot authentic, because then you've got the reader. You don't need hooks. You don't need a fancy plot. You don't need to come up with like the newest trope ever and be the one person, circa whenever the last trope was created. You don't have to be that person to make like, the new creative this or that. You can rewrite the same story in your own unique way. And if your character's authentic, your plot's authentic, your role's authentic, it doesn't matter how used up your trope is, because you've got no cliches and the reader is there, right there with you, experiencing it like it's the first time. So that wraps up the How to Write Authentic Character series. I'll probably add more to this series. Like, if you guys have questions, go ahead and tweet me at Francina Simone. If you feel like, I need to make videos on something else that has to do with character, and I'll add that to this series, like easy peasy. But for now, that wraps up this whole How to Build Authentic Character series. And my next videos will be about how to write authentic plots. This series on authentic plots. Something that, I really need to talk about, because that is what I struggled with the most when I first wrote my books. Like, you guys have no idea. So stay tuned for that. And please, like I said, if you've got any questions or definitely suggestions on what videos I should make next, tweet me at Francina Simone or leave a comment down below. And most important, don't forget to subscribe. So thanks for watching. TTYL. Ta-ta for now.